Investigate family life. Introduction. In 1963, a 4-year-old black boy began his early childhood education by leaving home with his mother at 5 a.m. to pick cotton and returned at 6 p.m. However, at age 5, he began first grade at an all-black public school. It was the first time he used an indoor restroom and drank water from a fountain. But when he entered the 5th grade in 1969, his school desegregated. For the first time, he was sharing a classroom with white students and a white female teacher, since most black teachers had lost their teaching positions. Moreover, he went from being a student to being a black student, since he had to say the word race instead of here when attendance was taken. During the first 2 weeks of school, anytime the teacher asked a question, of all the black students raised their hands. But the teacher would always wait for a white student to raise his or her hand and called on that student to answer the question. By the end of the first month, black students not only stopped raising their hands, but also became disinterested in what the teacher had to say, wishing that segregation had never happened. By the way, I was that black boy. Hello and welcome. My name is Leo McInnes. I am a doctoral student at North Central University. Overview. Please allow me to begin this PowerPoint presentation by giving you an overview of what it entails. First, I will explain how parents' involvement in their children's lives has evolved over time. Then, I will elaborate on how it specifically affects early childhood education. Afterwards, I will discuss how social changes has caused destabilization in family lives. Moreover, I will highlight the influences that social thinkers have had regarding to early childhood education. Notwithstanding, I will briefly mention other theories on parent involvement. And lastly, I will conclude by pointing out key points to take away from this presentation. Parent involvement has evolved over time. In ancient Egypt, family life was highly valued and children were looked upon as the god and goddess's blessing. Wealthy families would usually send their sons to school when they were about 7 years old. The education system consisted of reading, writing, mathematics, morality, sports, and instructions on spirituality. On the other hand, peasant boys was apprenticed by their fathers in the same trade or craft. The girls rarely went to school, but rather were home educated by their mothers, as well as learned household duties and child rearing. Since the average lifespan was about 29 years for girls and about 33 years for boys, girls would marry around 12 years old and boys between 16 and 20 years old. Similarly, the ancient Greeks had a formal and informal education system. However, boys from poor families did not go to school. Instead, they helped their families make a living. Girls were not allowed to go to school, but rather learn housekeeping from their mothers. Boys were also taught at home by their mothers until age 6. On the other hand, boys from wealthy families attended school between ages 7 and 14. They learned grammatica, music, and physical education. Grammatica entailed reading, writing, and arithmetic. In contrast, home and school relationships in the mid-20th century largely depended on mutual trust and understanding between teachers and parents. In this regard, children from nuclear families had great rapport with their teachers, for their parents were heavily involved in their children's education. However, parents from non-nuclear families had poor relationship because teachers believed that any issue with the children had resulted from their family structure. In fact, non-nuclear parents were rarely involved in their children's education. Another ever-increasing challenge for the schools came from immigrant families. Not only did they bring their diverse cultures to the schools, but also languages as well. And because of these factors and their legal status, immigrant parents was less likely to participate in school activities. One challenge faced by low-income single moms is raising their sons in urban areas. Although they want to participate in their children's activities as much as other parents, barriers such as child care, lack of transportation, and low levels of parent education hinder such reality. Thus, building strong relationships with single parents should be a school's top priority. Lastly, same-sex family structure violated the belief that families should consist of a male and a female. In other words, same-sex partners are vulnerable to exclusion and marginalization. However, they are still involved with their children's schools when they are not treated differently or discriminated against for their sexual orientation. Parental involvement affects on early childhood education in that they create positive experiences for their children's confidence and self-esteem during their early years. Because parents are in tune with what their children are doing at school, they can establish a link between what their children need to learn at home. In fact, this link is a significant part of children's development and learning. In other words, parental involvement can help children connect their classroom learning experience to real-world events. However, a most difficult challenge for teachers to resolve is how they can best engage parents in both places to have a positive influence on learning and achievement. Thus, establishing open lines of two-way communication between child care facilities and home will help make diverse parents feel more comfortable, thereby motivating them to participate in their children's learning and development. In this regard, teachers can simply ask parents if they have any special talents to share or get them to volunteer to read a story to the class. If parents either visit or volunteer at your school or in your classroom, make sure you show them your appreciation by taking the time to write them a personal thank you note. Since the early 1960s, social change in families have destabilized the nuclear family at a growing rate with less marriages, increased divorces, more unwed mothers, and partners choosing to cohabitate. Nonetheless, parents play a significant role in raising their children, as well as caring for their relatives in their golden years. On the other hand, President Lyndon B. Johnson spearheaded many policy initiatives and legislation called the Great Society. A few of the goals of this program was to end poverty, eradicate inequalities, and ensure every child was successful in life, regardless of his or her family's socio-economic status, respectively. One of the ways to end poverty was the creation of the President Initiative called the War on Poverty. Its goal was to help disadvantaged and marginalized people to break the cycle of poverty by assisting them in developing job skills, increasing their education, and becoming employed. Another event that was happening during that time was the Civil Rights Movement, which was led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In this regard, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law, which prohibited demonstration on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. This law was later expanded upon to cover the elderly and the disabled. To ensure that every child had opportunities to be successful, President Johnson launched a child care and homeschool program called Project Head Start. It was an 8-week summer program for 500,000 3 to 5-year-old children. Both children and parents would benefit from this program. In this regard, children will receive a high-quality early childhood education while their parents would serve as aides, council members, or paraprofessional team members. Unfortunately, the decline in the traditional nuclear family had led to many destabilized family structure and created differences between families. Some of the differences between families include not marrying, same-sex partners, single mothers, and immigrant families. In this regard, blacks are least likely to marry. Same-sex unions only account for 1% of U.S. households. 27% of single mothers live below the poverty line, and immigrant families who bring their diverse cultures and languages to this country. Over the next several PowerPoint slides, I will delineate the influences of social thinkers such as John Amos Comenius, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Johann Friedrich Pestalozzi, and Friedrich Wilhelm Froebel, and their contributions to early childhood education. Born in Bohemia, orphaned at an early age and reared by his aunt, Comenius followed in the footsteps of Martin Luther, who argued for a compulsory education for everyone. In fact, Comenius contributed to the infancy of early childhood education. In this regard, he was the first person to write a children's book named Orbis Pictus in an effort to promote literacy. This book described both a home-based and mother-led education for children up to the age of 5. Also recognized as a pedagogical intellect, he advocated for the universality of education that would be based on a powerful theoretical idea. Hence, he strongly supported a universal education and its significance in both individual and human society lives. Not only was Comenius a prolific scholar and pedagogical reformer, but also a 17th century bishop of the Moravian Church. He both posited that children's education should begin at home, but also thought that parents had the responsibility of rationally educating their children. Moreover, Comenius said that children should be taught various things that is known today as funds of knowledge. Interestingly, he believed that human life spanned from the womb of a mother to the grave. Best known for the concept that newborns' minds are tabula rasa, or blank slate, John Locke was the second person to become an advocate for early childhood education. In essence, he believed that children were naturally good with human potential, as well as progress. Moreover, Locke also asserted the nurture over nature argument, which led him to encourage young children to explore their environment and for parents to use kindness with discipline. Accordingly, Locke posited that young children were vulnerable to moral influences. In this regard, any information that they acquire during their lifetime would come from their sensory perception and experiences from the world surrounding them. Remarkably, he believed that the more children suffered in childhood, the more they would be prepared for life. While many grown-ups viewed children as miniature adults, Locke was able to discover the child within. He also viewed children as individuals, with each having his or her own distinct temperaments. Also, he offered some guidance in motivating children, such as to cherish their curiosity, secure their attention, and offer plenty of recreation activities. On the other hand, he fought against any educational system for which he understood to be stupid and cruel. As the father of today's educational theory, Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, "Everything is good as it comes from the hands of the maker of the world, but degenerate once it gets into the hands of man." Recognized as the father of early childhood education, he explained the significance of expression to generate a well-adjusted, free-thinking child. Moreover, he theorized that if young children were given the opportunity to develop naturally without the interferences or restrictions imposed on them by a given culture, they would reach their optimum academic and moral potential. In Rousseau's book titled Emile or On Education, that was written in 1762, he argues that civilization has been corrupted by society as opposed to making humanity more perfect. In Rousseau's view, not only do young children develop over a period of time, but also according to their own instinctive timeline. He also contended that young children must be at the very center of any academic curriculum, as well as responsible for their own learning. Moreover, Rousseau believed that returning to human nature rather than an artificial environment would alleviate all troubles. In fact, he believed that children should be isolated from society, allowed to engage in a natural tendency, and raised in a natural environment such as with physical forces, rivers, plants, and birds. Inspired by Rousseau and identified as the father of modern education, Johann Hendrik Pestalozzi argued that not only should education follow a child's innate nature, but also understand that his or her mother is the most important teacher. Moreover, he also believed that all forms of education was based on sensory impressions. With regards to teachers, he posited that their role was to teach the child, not the subject. Notwithstanding, Pestalozzi was troubled about the plight of the poor. After all, some either did not attend school or found it irrelevant to their needs. In this regard, he aimed to offer them an education that would improve the quality of their lives. Hence, he believed that education must advance their heads, hearts, and hands. Like Rousseau and many others, Pestalozzi argued that the child, rather than the teacher, should be at the center of learning. Moreover, he thought that young children would benefit from active participation in their learning experiences. Emphasizing the importance in the relationship between home and school, as well as parent and teacher, he ensured that young children learn from engaging in various developmental appropriate activities, as opposed to listening to facts, events, and someone else's experiences. Pestalozzi had published a book in 1781 titled Leonard and Gertrude that revealed a variety of his ideals regarding education and social justice. Considered as one of 20th century's most influential educators, Friedrich Wilhelm Frobisher was known as the father of kindergarten or the garden of children. As one of Petalassi's followers, his ideals was also based on the strength of mind, hands, and heart. Although he stressed that parents were children's first teacher, he also wanted to help young children to learn through play. After all, he thought that the best way for them to learn was by doing via hands-on activities as opposed to teacher-led instruction. In this regard, he insisted that teachers should facilitate learning instead of being the keepers of knowledge. On the other hand, Freiberg emphasized for there to be a close relationship between home and school. Acknowledging the uniqueness of every child's ability and potential, Freiberg maintained an optimistic and holistic view of each. Inspired by studying Comenius, his educational philosophy was centered on play, games, and toys. Remarkably, he only acknowledged 3 types of learning, which included knowledge in the forms such as gardening, animal care, and domestic tasks. As it is related to the physical environment, he ensured that his was safe yet intellectually challenging, encouraging curiosity and sensory stimulation. A few of the other theories on parent involvement includes those by Jean Piaget, Lev Vygotsky, and Urim Brandenburger. Respectively, Piaget developed numerous theories while observing and studying young children. He theorized that children go through 4 developmental stages that include sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operation. Other key concepts that Piaget developed include schema, assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration. Namely, a schema are categories of knowledge people use to interpret and understand things. On the other hand, assimilation involves combining new information with existing categories. Accommodation is creating another category when the new information does not fit. And equilibration is striking a balance between assimilation and accommodation. With regard to Vygotsky, his social cultural theory stressed the importance of social interaction in cognitive development. He also developed concepts known as the zone of proximate development and the more knowledgeable other. Lastly, Bronfenbrenner theory focused on studying children in 5 different environments, which was known as the ecological system. These systems include the microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, microsystem, and chronological system. In this PowerPoint presentation, I have reflected on how parents' involvement in their children's lives have evolved over time. Some of the key points that I would like you to remember include how the Egyptians and Greeks lived versus the rapid changes in family life that started in the 1960s, and the contribution of the socialist thinkers that I have identified has had a tremendous influence on early childhood education today. So this concludes this PowerPoint presentation. Thank you for watching.